100% natural to want closure after enduring any kind of narcissistic relationship. There are so many dramatic ups and downs in these kinds of spaces. It really does make sense to want some feeling that this really is the end and life is moving on. Unfortunately, narcissists generally are unwilling to entertain any such activity. Narcissists cannot tolerate closure because it means facing that they no longer have control over you. Narcissists are always looking to find their new supply, and closure, by definition, means that they can no longer get that supply from you. Because narcissists refuse to believe that someone they once exerted so much control over has actually stepped outside of their control, they will never accept any process of closure. So what does that mean for us survivors? We long for closure, but all the traditional ways to seek that closure, like having a heart-to-heart conversation, those just are not going to work in our situation. So are we screwed? No, you still can get closure, but it's going to look a little bit different. Here are 3 things you can do to get the closure that you deserve without breaching any of your boundaries with a toxic person. Number 1, come to terms with the fact that even if you reached out to the toxic person, they would not provide you what you're looking for. We spend time imagining what would happen if they would just chat with us. We romanticize this final conversation. We imagine being able to express our feelings and this person receiving that information and honoring that information. We like to build up this final conversation as something very beautiful and very satisfying. We want to imagine all of the good that could come from just that one last conversation. But while all of that is well and good, we need to remember what reality is like, right? We need to face that any more conversations would not result in any of the goods that we are hoping for. So what I want you to do is try, I'm not saying don't have those kind of imagined final conversations that end up good. I think that that's a good exercise to kind of explore some of what you're kind of looking for. But I don't want you to get confused with that romanticized version of this conversation and the kind of actual conversation you're much more likely to have with this person, right? So when you're thinking about closure, when you're thinking about this last conversation, I want you to think about the last 10 conversations you had with the toxic person. Okay, see if you can do that. Be mindful of your mental health as you do this. It could be a triggering experience, but try to reflect on what some of your actual experiences were in the past when you tried to communicate your feelings or, any of your discomfort with the choices that the toxic person made. Now, with that in mind, I want you to try to use that as a guide for imagining what this final conversation would actually look like. Most likely, if you're dealing with a toxic person, it's not going to look very similar to the romanticized version, right? Most likely, if you're dealing with this toxicity, it's going to end up being kind of an abusive situation, right? The toxic person is going to be defensive. They're probably going to try to gaslight you. They're going to be very dismissive of any genuine concerns you bring, right? One thing that's tricky when we go no contact with toxic people is we typically go through a lot of growth, right? We've finally gotten this source of abuse out of our lives, and we're suddenly starting to be a different kind of person. We're starting to get some of our self-worth back. We're starting to feel more ourselves. We are growing. That's a beautiful thing. We love that about no contact. We love that. But it's important to remember that the toxic person is not going through those stages of growth, right? The toxic person is most likely about in the same place or worse than where you left them when you decided to go no contact. Okay, so it's great that you've changed. It's great that you're evolving as a person. I'm really happy for you. Don't get confused though and think that the toxic person has also gone through those stages of growth, because they haven't. So I want you, when you're thinking about what this closure conversation would be, I want you to really base that vision on your previous experiences with a toxic person. You can have the romanticized version, that can be an aspirational thing, but don't let yourself start thinking that that is a thing you could actually have with this particular toxic person. Number 2, figure out what you really need from the closure and think of creative ways to accomplish that. Often navigating a toxic person is more similar to navigating the death of a loved one than it is navigating ordinary relationships. Imagine how you might find some of the closure you're looking for if the toxic person was no longer walking this earth. Right? This is an exercise to kind of push our creativity. Right? Sometimes we get really stuck because the way that society says we should approach these kind of problems in relationships just doesn't work when we're dealing with toxic people. However, we don't need to say like, oh, I wish I didn't want closure, or oh, I wish I had different feelings about the situation. You are a human being, and it is normal for human beings to want closure after a very difficult event in their lives. So we need to find a way to honor your need, your reasonable need for closure, but also honor the fact that this is a toxic person and we have to navigate toxic people a little bit differently. Part of that process is really thinking hard about what do you actually need? What are you actually looking for when you're seeking closure? And thinking about ways that you could accomplish that without involving the toxic person. Right? So sometimes when people have passed away, they do stuff like they plant a tree, and that helps them honor the past loved one. Right? Sometimes they, like when you get a divorce, right? That's another moment in society where, we don't want to involve the other person, but we want to have some kind of closure. I've seen people like burn their wedding dress, right? Maybe you have some physical letters from the toxic person, and part of your process of closure could be burning those letters, or maybe those pictures that you have with them. You need to step a little bit outside of the traditional relationship advice and really find ways that are going to be satisfying to you. Now, this can be really difficult, right? In toxic relationships, with toxic people, you really don't have a lot of space to exist beyond the toxic person, right? Toxic people take up all of the available space, which makes the rest of us shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink. But part of the healing process from that is to find ways for you to take up space again. Part of that requires getting in touch with the things that you really need. Okay, so this is a moment where we've got to dig deep on what you need from closure. And then extra steps. I know it's a burden sometimes, but this is where we're at. This is the reality. So we got to figure out what you need, and then we need to be creative about how to get you the things that you need. I know what you might really need is just a mom that was less devastating as a human. I wish I could give you those things, but everything that you need is not realistic in this situation, right? We're not going to be able to change the toxic person. We're not going to be able So I want you to push yourself past this. I just need one more conversation. Because if you did the thing from the first step, we already thought hard about probably the thing you're imagining for that one conversation is not really the thing you would get if you had it. So we got to dig deeper. We got to push ourselves. Number 3, become authentically peaceful with your boundaries. This search for closure can often make us doubt and potentially violate our boundaries with a toxic person. That is just not good for anybody involved. The way to solve this is by truly making peace with those boundaries. When you've done this, you will no longer be haunted by the need for closure. You will have created the closure that you are desiring. It's hard to make peace with our boundaries, but I can help you do that. I have built a 6-week coaching program designed to help you be more confident and make peace with your boundaries. In this program, I'm going to give you an easy-to-use 5-step process to help you integrate your boundaries into your core values. Once you've embraced just how necessary your boundaries are to living the life that you deserve, we will explore how you can navigate any doubt that creeps into your mind and how to resolve it. Because everyone's journey through boundary setting is different, my course includes 6 one-on-one sessions with me, Dr. Louise. You can sign up to get all of the latest information on the course at the link in the description below. I love helping folks discover the power of making peace with their boundaries. It is an often overlooked step in the boundaries process, and I know from my personal experience with 2 toxic parents, a toxic ex, and now a toxic mother-in-law, that this step is one of the most important ones. I would love to chat with you about your journey navigating toxic people. If you pop over to my Instagram, it's just @empowermentthroughthought. You can shoot me a DM and we can strike up a conversation today. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.